Everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar of the course on experience capitalization for continuous learning. The module 6 is about generating change. I'm quite pleased to actually talk about this module and to introduce it to you, because this is actually the goal of the experience capitalization. Let's go back to the cycle and see where we fit. So the first module was about to know what was experience capitalization and why it was important. The second module was about how we facilitate the process. The third module was on the preparation, how we frame and we plan the process. Then we had the module of 4 and 5 about the implementation. And now with module 6, we are in adopt, adapt and scale up, as well as mainstreaming. So we have these two lessons. And I would like to actually just introduce this first part. I also wanted to tell you that in French, this part called generating change is also called appropriation or valorisation. Which means that you're making this your own. So appropriation, this is becoming yours. So this is exactly when you adopt and adapt and scale up, you are making sure that what you have heard from others, what you have learned from others, that you can replicate it and do it for yourself. Reason for giving others the right tools, the steps, the advice, the conditions to be able to have this appropriation. And we call this also valorisation, which is to give value, because what you are sharing will actually gain more value to others. I will now pass the floor to Jorge, with the other facilitator, who is going to guide us through this module 6. The floor is yours, Jorge.
Thank you, Sophie. A good day to you, good day to all participants, and also a good day to all of you who are going to be watching this video or listening to this presentation afterwards. I know these are a bit difficult days for everybody. I hope all of you are safe and healthy and taking care, and that, well, I'm happy that we are able at least to communicate in this way, and that we can continue communicating in this way. Yeah, we're going to talk a bit about this last step of the whole capitalization process, which, as Sophie has already mentioned, we could perhaps easily argue that this is the most important part. We've been talking about collecting lessons, or we've been talking about preparing documents and sharing documents, but we could say that that is really not the main objective of the whole capitalization process. When we were, if you remember back in module 1, when we were planning the process, our objective was not to end up with a document, but our objective was to make sure that the lessons could be used and would improve what we are doing. The whole purpose is to improve our experiences, to improve the work we are doing. So we have to take special steps toward that. As you can see here on this slide, it is not enough just to draw the lessons or to share them, but what we need to especially focus on is to put them into practice, so that we see change, so that we see new experiences, so that we see better experiences, which of course help us solve the problems that we are trying to solve in the rural areas. Now, when we talk about putting lessons into practice, most of the times we recognize a problem, which for many of us it is quite common. All of us who have been working, for example, with agricultural research activities or with extensionists, we may recognize all those cases where, for example, a new variety of a specific crop is released, and then we all think that this variety is fantastic, it leads to higher yields, or it is tolerant to stress or tolerant to drought. And then we realize that even though it is so fantastic, it is not always taken up by farmers. And sometimes it happens that only a very small percentage of the farmers who are supposed to benefit from this new variety are taking it up. So the question is why? Why is it that this is happening? Many times when we talk about experience capitalization, we face the same difficulties. We draw or we identify a lot of interesting lessons, and these are not taken up. Partly, of course, because they are participants don't know about them, or because they are not shared good enough. But sometimes they are shared, and they come with a very nice document. It is presented very well, and still it doesn't happen. What we have to see is that adoption, let's say the taking up of these lessons and putting them into practice, is not something that happens immediately, or it is not a very straightforward process. And this is exactly the same as in the example that I was mentioning. When a new variety is released, it doesn't happen that immediately all farmers in one region or in the world are picking it up. First, they need to know about this. They need to become aware of the possibilities that this variety brings. Then they show some interest and they start looking for additional information. And then they need to compare it and to realize if this new variety is in fact as good as people are saying it is. And they need to compare it with the old varieties that they've been growing or that they've been using. And only when they are convinced that this is in fact so, then they adopt it and they start following up. When we talk about experience capitalization, we see that this, what we call this adoption ladder, is equally valid. It doesn't just happen that we provide lessons in a very nice publication and immediately everybody follows it. Because first, those who are going to be following need to become aware. They need to see if the information there is enough, or if they need to look for more information, for additional resources, etc. Then they need to compare it and to form a positive attitude or an opinion about it. And only if this opinion is really positive is everybody going to follow it. This is what we call the adoption ladder. And as I said, this is happening everywhere. Now, at the same time, we have to think that this ladder or these steps are going to be smoother or are going to go from one to the other if some conditions are met. If I release a variety of a given crop, and this is not better than the old variety, then it is obvious that nobody is going to take it. So we have to think, for example, one of the conditions is the relative advantage. How much better is the new idea when compared to the old idea? We also have to think if it is, let's say, compatible. Does it fit? Does it follow the procedures? Does it match with the context in which this, for example, new variety or the old variety has been used? We have to think if it is acceptable, if, for example, if the taste is the same. Is it easier to cook? Is it easier to sell it? A farmer is never going to adopt a new variety if he or she knows that this is not going to be sold, or if he knows that it is not going to be accepted by his family, perhaps because the taste is not very good. So these are all characteristics which are in the innovation, in the idea, in the lessons that we are presenting, and which we have to think or we have to pay attention to. Because if these lessons or these innovations are too complicated or they don't meet these conditions, it is quite obvious that nobody is going to adopt them. That nobody is going to feel the urge to look for more information, and nobody is going to have this positive opinion which is going to help the adoption process. Now, Many times, of course, we will realize that those who are expected to adopt an idea or an innovation live in a slightly different context. So the idea might be perfect, but the context where we are is not really exactly the same. So we need to change the innovation, or we need to change the ideas slightly, not really drastically, but we need to adapt them. So when we talk about adoption, we always talk about adaptation at the same time. We can say that these two ideas go together because whatever innovation we are talking, or whatever new idea, I think that we will always realize that there is no one size fits all. There is not an innovation or a solution which is equally valid for everybody everywhere. All contexts are different, whether it is because of the time, because we live in a different time, because we have different resources, because the weather is different, or because the social conditions are different. So we need to make sure that to adopt an idea, we need to realize that this idea also needs to perhaps change slightly so that it matches better and solves the problems, the specific problems which a specific group of people may have. This is what we call by adaptation. And then if another idea is that of scaling up, which of course is linked. The more people adopt an idea, the larger number of activities that will be involved, the larger the results. This is something that, of course, many people are talking about because we have a lot of problems in the rural areas, and perhaps we have fantastic experiences, but these experiences are not enough to solve the problems. So we need a much broader geographic coverage to solve the problems of a lot of people. We also need faster results because we have new problems. We have new problems appearing. For example, if we think of climate change, which we cannot just wait and see what is going to happen. So we need to go work faster. And the very successful experiences which we can find all over the place may not be enough. May also not be enough in terms of equitable access to these solutions. So some people are benefiting, some people are not benefiting. This is just a short background of why we need to think of scaling up, reaching a larger number of beneficiaries, working with a larger number of people so that we have a much greater impact. Now we can only have results in terms of scaling up if, of course, more and more people are adopting the lessons that we think are good solutions or good practices. When we talk about scaling up, we can see different dimensions. Now I know this is a little bit theoretical, but we can think of scaling up just in terms of number of beneficiaries or coverage. This is what we call the horizontal dimension. We can also think in vertical terms when we are thinking of activities at a slightly different level. So it is not just, for example, having more and more farmers growing a new variety of maize, but also having more and more farmers or more and more people processing that same variety of maize. So when we talk about the vertical dimension, we are thinking of activities which, for example, add value or which contribute at another level. And then we can also think of a functional dimension by which we are trying to have an influence in the context in which all these activities are taking place, so that this context allows for many more results. And this is basically, for example, when we talk about the political regulations. If we have an influence in the political regulations which allow for more activities because, for example, of subsidies, then we are sure that we are able to have much more results, and in that sense, scale up the impact that we are having. If we continue with a little bit of theory, we can see that when we talk about scaling up, we're talking of a process, a path that goes from a specific idea which has been tested through a learning process and to much more individuals being involved and many more individuals benefiting from it. Now the theory shows that there are two different types of, how do I say it, conditions which determine that this scaling up process is going to take place. One of them are called the drivers, which as it says here are the forces which push the process in a certain way. For example, incentives. Now what I just said, if you have a subsidy or if there is no or if there is support from leaders or from directors of a company, etc., then we are sure that many more activities are being taken up. And together with the drivers, we have the spaces, which are the conditions, enabling conditions, which allow this process to take place, which may be, for example, rules and regulations in a particular place, or the availability of resources, or the availability of sufficient lessons and information, which are going to help people do what they want to do. So, when we're talking about a scaling up process, we start with the adoption, of course. Know what we said, the ladder, we see how people react to a certain piece of information. We also consider the need to adapt to the specific conditions where we are. And then when we try to go massive and to scale up, we need to consider both the drivers and the spaces and see how much of them are in place, because the number of them being in place are what is going to determine that we are successful or not. And to complicate a little bit more the theory, we go back to the innovation itself, to the idea that we're going to be, or that we expect to be upscaled. And we have to think of it in terms of its own replicability. Is this an idea which can be copied? Is this an idea which is simple enough so that many more people are going to copying? Is it an idea that is responding to a specific demand? In that sense, we can, well, make another simple comparison. Nowadays, more and more people have a mobile phone. This is an idea which has really been replicated because mobile phones are responding to a specific demand and a specific need. And the simpler that these mobile phones are made, the more that people are going to ask for them. But if you have a mobile phone, which, for example, is too expensive, then it becomes less replicable because not everybody is willing to pay a lot of money for an expensive mobile phone. When we think of innovations or ideas of practices, we also have to think in the same way as we do with a mobile phone. We have to see, is this idea, can it be applied in a new context? Is there a demand for it? Is it going to respond to the need of the people? Is it going to fit with the context in which we expect it to be taken up? And if it fits, is it going to be equally successful? Or is it going to have to be adapted drastically? In order to know if this is going to work or not, we have to think of different aspects. I've already mentioned one of them. How many resources do we need for this to be replicated? As I said, if our innovations, not necessarily a mobile phone, but any innovation, if this requires too many financial resources or too many external inputs, then we have a lower probability that it is going to be replicated. If it is a very complicated, long intervention, then we also have a difficulty, because if it is too long, it means it is going to require the intervention of many persons or too many resources. Are we having the sufficient support? Is the support available? I know that I am not going to buy a new mobile phone if the support for this new mobile phone is not easily available, if I have to pay a lot of money for it, or if it is simply not there, I'm not going to adopt it. The general context, of course, whether who's managing, what are the roles and responsibilities involved, who is taking the lead, who is supporting us in order to do what we want to do, is another important issue that we have to consider, and, of course, which is going to determine whatever happens in terms of, as I said, not just adopting a specific set of lessons, but also scaling up and having a much broader impact. Now here we can see just a summary of these three ideas. I don't need to go through it, but it just summarizes the aspects we have been talking, remembering that what we want at the end of an experience capitalization process is many more beneficiaries, a greater impact in terms of poverty reduction. That's what we want to aim at. And we do this, of course, by describing a case, by analyzing it in detail, by drawing lessons, by sharing these lessons in specific ways, by using the right products and channels, all those things that we have been discussing before, but making sure that we do all of that so that we reach here, and not just for the sake of producing a nice document or anything of the sort. Now, one of the key activities that help us making sure that this adoption and scaling up process effectively takes place, in addition, of course, to paying attention to all the conditions, is this idea of advocacy, which means the active promotion, trying to convince others to follow the advice that we are providing or to follow the recommendations that we are providing. And this is not just, for example, going back to the example of the farmers adopting a new variety of a crop, this is not just convincing the farmers themselves, but this is basically convincing those who are in a position to change the context, to change the situation, to provide more of these drivers and spaces who are going to help with the adoption process. When we talk about advocacy, most of the times we refer to an awareness raising program, communicating, campaigning, so that we convince the local authorities. This is all very important, but when we talk about experience capitalization, we are not only convincing the local authorities, many times we are convincing our colleagues, or we are convincing our director, or we are convincing other organizations who are doing similar things than us. This is also an advocacy effort, and I think this is where we have to pay special attention, so that we are not just presenting lessons, but we are also working to convince those people and demonstrating that these lessons are in fact valid and worth taking up. When we talk, of course, of advocacy, we are thinking of a process which, as we have discussed before, starts with a goal, making it very clear this is what we want to achieve, and identifying who are these persons whom I can work, who is my target audience, but also who am I going to be working with, who's going to help me make sure that the message reaches the right persons. An important part of the advocacy process, of course, is its own monitoring and evaluation. We have to make sure regularly look at the activities we're doing, regularly measure if we are on track or not, and if we are not on track, of course, try to improve whatever we're doing. After this, we come to a new step, which is very similar to what we have just been mentioning, but at the same time it is different, because we're talking about adoption, but we're talking about adoption of the experience capitalization process. So not just about the lessons that we have drawn with an experience capitalization process, but the adoption of the process itself. One of the things I like most about this module which FAO prepared is that it focuses on this, because I really believe that an experience capitalization process, of course, it is very useful, but it cannot be one activity, something that you do only once and that then it's done and that it's finished. We are regularly busy with different experiences, with different activities, and we are permanently facing new problems. So I believe that we actually permanently should be doing experience capitalization. The only way to continue practicing this approach is by having the conditions, by having it as part of our daily work. This is what we call mainstreaming. Mainstreaming refers to the efforts to embed a concept or a practice in an organization so that it becomes a regular activity. What we want with this is that experience capitalization, as I said, is not just something that we do once in a while or something that took place once, but something which is a core part, something that we do every day, and that we are regularly, not just regularly doing it, but regularly obtaining the benefits, regularly producing lessons, and regularly seeing that these lessons are being used. Of course, in order to do this, we need to take special steps, because just like with adoption, this mainstreaming process is not going to take place on its own. So we have to prepare for it, and we have to make sure that it happens. Now, what are the benefits? I don't think we need to go very much in detail here, because the benefits are obvious. The more experience capitalization we do, the better results we are going to have in terms of the activities that we're doing. I can say that the more we do, the better. But by having it institutionalized, by having it as a regular activity, we can also have stronger teams which are going to make the whole process more effective. We are going to be able to use the resources better, so we can say that we are also going to be more efficient. If we are regularly showing that we draw lessons, that we are able to improve the work we do, that we are providing recommendations to others, then it becomes clear that we are going to know better who we are, understand better what we can do, and of course have a much better reputation. I would say that all of this comes together, that if we really have conditions in place so that we regularly follow an experience capitalization approach, the main result is going to be that we have more and more lessons, that we have better and better projects, and that we have better and better results, of course, in terms of impact. Now, as I said, this is not going to take place on its own. We need to create the conditions. And if you realize that this is very similar to the adoption processes that we have been discussing before, what we want is the adoption of the process. So we need to think of the adoption ladder, and we need to think of these drivers and forces which are going to allow us, for our organization, to continue playing this process on. This slide summarizes some of these general conditions, and these conditions, as you say, are the same that we have been discussing before. We need support from our directors, we need support from our colleagues, we need an organizational culture which values what we are doing. But at the same time, we need to, all of us, we need to know what is it that we're doing. So we need to understand what experience capitalization is, and we have to be convinced that it is really contributing. Just as with adoption of the new variety of maize, if we are not convinced that this is better than the old variety, then we are not going to adopt it. With experience capitalization is the same. We have to make sure that our colleagues are convinced, which means that we have to show the results of an experience capitalization process. And we have to demonstrate that the time that we are investing in it, the resources that we are investing, the whole process that we go through, this idea of writing, of organizing workshops, of discussing with participants, etc., we have to demonstrate that it is worth doing it, that it is really contributing to new lessons and to new projects and new initiatives. The more we are able to demonstrate this, the easier it will be to have more and more processes and to have new directives within our organization, to have the support of our colleagues, to have a demand for it, to have more people interested in it, etc. Of course, we need to have the resources, but the more we are able to demonstrate that it is worth investing, the easier it is going to be for any organization to make sure that the resources are there. And of course, we need the same thing as we said before. We need advocacy, but in this case, an internal advocacy process by which we are focusing on our colleagues, our directors, the people working with us, because we have to convince them that this is an important process, that it has to be supported, that it really brings value for money. So we need to do this, and this means organizing an advocacy campaign in the same way as we have been working in terms of advocacy towards local authorities or governments or politicians, etc. We need to plan and develop a few activities so that our colleagues understand what we are doing, so that they get convinced that it is worth continuing doing it, and so that they join us in the efforts for new capitalization processes. Of course, this is not going to be easy. It takes time. It takes time convincing. It takes time demonstrating results. And this is a known example that not everybody reacts in the same way to the information that we are providing. Some people are what we call innovators, that pick up whatever new idea comes up. And if you go and say, oh, let's do experience capitalization, they are going to be immediately interested because they are quick in seeing that this provides some benefits. Other people that take much longer, perhaps because they have had a bad experience, or maybe because there is not enough information, etc. People react differently, and this same curve, it is not just for those out there. No, this is also for our own colleagues. If I think of my colleagues, some people will be innovators, while some people may be the laggards, that for different reasons, they will just take a bit longer in recognizing the need for such a process. So we need to see who are we working with, what are the general conditions that we face within our organizations, and in this way anticipate to the difficulties that we are going to have. If we link this to the conditions that we were talking about before, making sure that all those conditions are in place, and organize a comprehensive advocacy process, I think that more and more organizations very soon are going to have experience capitalization as a key part of all their activities. The idea, of course, is that we go in a process with this table so that organizations who just started with one simple experience capitalization process, throughout these efforts that we are talking about, are going to be able to, in a relatively short time, demonstrate that they are in this full mainstreaming situation where the process is fully embedded, it involves all actors, all colleagues, and regularly shows a large number of benefits. Yes, so with this, I finish here with these steps. I recognize that this perhaps is a little bit theoretical, so we need to look at it more in detail. We need to go back to the information provided on the module or provided in different sources. And something very important, which I think that we need to do, all of us, is to demonstrate that this is effectively taking place. As I said before, the more we are able to demonstrate that this is not just theory, but in fact practice, the more we are going to be able to convince everybody. Many people have been talking about experience capitalization for many years, but not many people have been talking about adoption and mainstreaming. So in that sense, we are doing something which is relatively new, and we have to talk about it, but not just in the theory. We also have to talk about it, showing that the practice is effectively taking place and that we are showing positive results. So all of you who are already working for mainstreaming the process within your organizations, I invite you, please share what you're doing and share your results. The more we do this, the better we're going to be working together. Thank you, Sophie. Now, back to you for this explanation.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for this very nicely done presentation, and also for guiding us step by step. As many of you might have recognized, we are closing the loop. The first module we were introducing what were the benefits, and in this module we are again showing the benefits of doing mainstreaming and having the benefits of experience capitalization. We have prepared for you, as usual, job aids, which are practical tools that you will be able to use during the capitalization process. And we are going to use two of them in the assignment. And for where you can find the assignment and the job aids for these modules is in the link that you have just in this slide. So let's discover the assignment. The first assignment, which is related to adoption, adaptation, and scaling up, is just using the job aids that we had already providing you with for Module 5. You remember when you were documenting the experience. And you may recognize here the template that FAO is using for collecting information and data, analyzing and documenting experiences, innovation, good or promising practices. In this assignment, we would like you to focus on several elements, which are these ones. Success factors, the constraints, the lessons learned, how sustainability was achieved, and what are the advice to replicate or to scale up such experience or intervention. So you may have already started documenting this, and we would like you to be in the shoes of someone who is very much interested, and it is like in the adoption ladder. You have someone who has received the information, who is aware, who would like to practice, but he needs also to have the attitude and also the tools to know how to really practice it. So whenever you are actually documenting things, it is very important that you think about not only the what, but the how and why it was done this way. So these success factors happen because, and this is the way they happened. The constraints, we face these constraints because, and this is how we were able to go about them. In short, these are the lessons learned that we would like to share with you, and also in order for your experience to be sustainable, these are the things that you have to think about. And then you can say if you want to replicate it, and if we have to scale it up at the national level, for example, we have to think about the drivers and the spaces that need to be taken into consideration. So you see what we have seen in this module will really enable you to go a little bit further. So the assignment, we have a double assignment. The first part is really to fine-tune a little bit what you have done in the previous assignment, to really carefully look at the success factor, constraints, lessons learned, sustainability, replicability, and upscaling. Then we have prepared a second assignment, which is what Jorge has shown on what are the conditions that are necessary for mainstreaming. And here we go one point after another, like the clear condition for the management support. So, are these conditions in place? Yes or no? If not, what steps can be taken? So you remember, maybe I have to do an internal advocacy campaign. Then you have organization culture. Are people encouraged to share ideas, discuss alternatives? Is this already met? If not, what can you do at your stage and what can you advise so that it is being taken? So this will be the same thing for the individual and organizational capacities and skills. Do you need to have webinars or a meeting or maybe a course, or why not propose to do this course to your colleagues? How are you going to motivate the participants? So remember, it's very important to have the evidence. So here again, you see all what we have built along the experience capitalization will be used. Are there common understanding of the process and the benefits? And we continue with, are there information management system in place? How do you share the information in the office with your colleagues? Do you have a shared drive? Do you have a platform? Should you have one? Which one you should take? Then, do you have clear organizational processes? Who is responsible for what? Who is doing what? How is this being done? How do you collaborate to avoid the duplication? So you have to see how the different teams are working or not working and what should be done so that they could be working together. And also, is experience capitalization part of operation? So is this being in your programmatic approach or not? And what will be then the resources? Financial, capacity, human resources, time, political commitment, leadership commitment to be able to actually go through the mainstreaming. And some people are saying, I don't know what to choose. The thing is, but do you have an idea of in which area first you would like to do this capitalization process? Is this about a project? Is it something about a process? Is it about a partnership that you have had? Is it a technical area? So this is why, you know, we like to have this mentoring, because it is exactly to help people to identify, to be able to frame. And this is the module 3 about preparing, how you frame and how you plan this.
If I may add there something, you mentioned,
yes, please,
some people don't know what experience to choose and therefore find it difficult to get started. I got an email from one of the participants also asking this same question, and then asking me if she could focus on the work that she's doing in her own office. And I thought that this is perhaps the most interesting thing to do, is look at the work that you are doing and look at the things which are part of the work that you do, for which you would like to have special lessons, that you would like to learn something yourself, things that you don't know, but which are, of course, influencing the activities that you do. So look at the work you do, not necessarily look at the work at others. Look at the work you do, focus on the things that you are doing for which you would like to know something more, and start from that. And try to pick a concrete activity. So don't focus on the whole project that you are doing or that you're trying to complete, but focus on something specific, a part of the project, a part of the things that you do which perhaps are not working very well or that you think can be improved. I think that's a very good start to it.
Yes, it's like, for example, you are preparing workshop. Have you been capitalizing how you're preparing this workshop? If you're facilitating things, have you documented this facilitation so that next time you have to facilitate an event, you don't have to reinvent the wheel? So to learn from what worked last time. So for example, if you had a training workshop, what worked last time? What didn't work? Why it didn't work? So what should I change for the next time I'm going to have this either facilitation or training workshop? This is where you're going to capitalize. And you remember in the first module, capitalization is a natural way of living. It's just that we don't systematically do it, and we not systematically document it. That's why if we are doing this work, we will be more efficient and we will lose less time and we will not reinvent the wheel. I see other people so Anthony saying he is alone and he is taking experience capitalization in the project. You may be alone in thinking of doing the experience capitalization in the project. However, to be successful, you need to engage with others. So this is all the work that you have to do with advocacy to make sure that you're not fully alone. You will be guiding, but you will need the support of others because it's very difficult to do it completely alone. I thank you all for being with us today and looking forward to engage on the platform. Remember that we have a forum for each and every module, so you can ask your questions and we would be very happy to continue being with you online. And this is where we can meet you. Thank you very much to everybody. Have a great day and thank you very much for all your comments. Bye bye for now. See you online.